Hello everyone. My name is Dr. Rudolf Shardy, and this is a recap video of the first session on Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad's rich, layered, and paradoxical novella or long tale. It is this novella that we will try to tackle throughout the semester in the framework of a course entitled The English Novel. I am recording this short lecture video for you to revisit in a more or less systematic manner some of the key ideas covered in class and to highlight important literary terms and concepts closely related to Conrad's extremely vivid text. I started my first class with a baleful caveat about the difficulty of the text we are about to read. Heart of Darkness is a text that the preponderating part of even my most scintillating students find unreasonably demanding. It makes them doubt themselves, their erudition in the process of exploring possible meanings and interpretations with the critical tools at their disposal. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with this. It simply lies in human behavior that we want concrete answers and are often discontented and unable to maneuver the gray areas. Of course, it is in this gray area that the richness of literature comes alive. You may have already asked yourself, why do most universities place a core text as difficult as Heart of Darkness in the center of academic attention? Those of you who have already finished reading the novella or are rereading it for a second or third time have noticed that even after several stabs at the text, it remains replete with ambiguities and unresolved mysteries. Still, I believe that there is value in this struggle, just as much as in reading The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot or Ulysses by James Joyce. When I read Heart of Darkness, a text that was written in 1899, I am inadvertently reminded of what Joyce famously said about Ulysses more than 2 decades later. He claimed to have put in so many enigmas and puzzles in the novel that would keep the professors busy for centuries arguing over what he meant. This is a famous quotation by him. Joyce believed that this was, I quote, the only way of ensuring one's immortality. While Ulysses is a supreme literary work and a dominant text of modernism, Heart of Darkness serves as an important precursor to more radical and more experimental modernism. Conrad's linguistic, stylistic, and technical virtuosity by themselves make the text uh, difficult to tackle. Additionally, and perhaps more importantly, at the heart of the modernist aesthetic represented by the novella lies a certain conviction that the previously sustaining structures of human life had been either destroyed or shown up as falsehoods or fantasies. I consider the concepts of order, sequence, and unity in Heart of Darkness and other works of art as expressions of a desire for coherence rather than an actual reflection on reality. Our partial goal in this video will be to have a look at a handful of techniques which are symptomatic incarnations of various aspects of the modernist aesthetic. However, I would like us to consider why I have said that there is value in the struggle as regards reading Heart of Darkness and understanding the text, of course. First, I want you to gain working familiarity with the novella and use the skills you'll learn analyzing Heart of Darkness to access independently other texts that are just as challenging. You will learn that different types of text require different approaches, that as readers, you must read Heart of Darkness and other texts like it with intent. To accomplish this, we will try to refrain from making sweeping generalizations about the text, about its inception, etc. Instead, we will be heavily relying on the various techniques of close reading. So you will be expected to have a pencil in hand and annotate the text in order to observe facts and details in a particular passage or on the text as a whole. Our first class was partly dedicated to discussing the first 3 paragraphs of Heart of Darkness, where we made observations, among other things, about Conrad's use of dark and light tonalities, setting the novella's ominous mood, as well as his portrayal of the scene as though the mooring of the Nelly, cruising yawl, and the Thames, described as an interminable waterway, were painted on a canvas. Our future classes will be dedicated to the close reading of the novella in a similar vein. We will be looking at the text for repetitions, patterns, contradictions, and our aim will be to notice striking features of the text, including rhetorical features, structural elements, cultural and historical references. Second, Heart of Darkness is especially fertile ground for interpretation. Can we ignore Conrad's intent when we judge the success of Heart of Darkness as a literary work? Think of Wimsatt and Birdsley's famous article entitled The Intentional Fallacy, which describes the problem inherent in trying to judge a work of art by assuming the intent or purpose of the artist who created it. If one believes that Conrad and the text are racist, does that negate any value it has as literary art, or can the work be judged on its own merits regardless of what Conrad intended? If you arrive at the conclusion that Conrad and Marlowe were both racist, can the text still be read as an indictment, as the repudiation of imperialism? Or must it be read as a warning against the dangers of allowing darkness to overwhelm civilization? Now, these are text-specific questions we will deal with in our discussions in class as we approach the text in its totality. Along these lines, towards the end of the semester, we will be using our critical tools to arrive at a better understanding of Heart of Darkness in context. To this end, you will be exposed to understanding a select number of articles taken from a compilation of case studies, which will provide you with 3 or 4 perspectives of reading the text, including reader response criticism, feminist and gender criticism, and new historicism. We'll do this if time allows. So far, we have read together the opening lines of Heart of Darkness, where we are drawn into the account of an anonymous narrator who describes Marlowe relating his Congo experiences to a circle of friends sitting on the deck of a cruising yawl. Now, the opening, as is the case of all works of fiction, is relevant for many reasons. To begin with, it establishes a dark tone, which will be the subject of our discussion in later lectures. Repeatedly, images prove paradoxical in the novella. The customary associations of white and black, of light and dark, are variously exploited and subverted. London, that is Gravesend, where the Nelly is anchored, is associated with brooding gloom, while the darkness of the title refers both to the heart of darkness, the heart of darkest Africa, and to the benighted London, London at night, London enshrouded in darkness, and to innumerable kinds of darknesses and obscurities, physical, moral, and ontological. Additionally, we have referred to the interminable waterway connecting civilized England to the rest of the world. And those of you who have read the novella will clearly recall that the River Congo, though not named explicitly as such anywhere, is where all the action takes place. It's a continuation of the Thames and of the journey that had begun. Also, it is worthy of note that water comes to stand for the unconscious as well as the unpredictability of the journey that Marlowe undertakes. Here, I need to call your attention to the many plausible interpretations of water in Anglo-American literary tradition. Alongside other notable examples, Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, and Herman Melville's very famous Moby Dick of the Great White Whale are a case in point. Perhaps more important to the narrative at hand is the fluidity that water represents in modern literature. In addition to representing the unconscious, water should remind you, the student of literature, to its relevance to a radically new form of writing that is stream of consciousness. I'm sure that you have already encountered the term on a number of occasions in your literary work. The term itself was coined by an American psychologist and philosopher, William James, and the older brother of Henry James. And it appeared in his seminal work, The Principles of Psychology, published in 1890. And it has been understood in its literary context as a device which is used to convey a character's thought and sense impressions without conventional dialogue and punctuation. Virginia Woolf uses stream of consciousness to great effect in Mrs. Dalloway. She even remarks that at its most perfect, stream of consciousness should, and I quote, make us feel ourselves seated at the center of another mind. Even though Heart of Darkness never puts the reader directly into Marlowe's mind or consciousness, later on in the novella we will notice that Marlowe's own freewheeling storytelling technique transforms the story's structure into something largely psychological. Rather than unfolding in linear time, the narrative will be shown to follow Marlowe's thoughts, feelings, queries, and sense impressions, his hostility or perhaps acceptance of imperialism. Now, jumping back to the opening lines, we can see that it is through this waterway that Europe and what is believed to be an exotic African land begin to merge, only to imply that England's civilization is all about false pretenses. It is but a veneer over the dark heart and malice that all human beings harbor. To particularly partially substantiate the claim, obviously without having garnered sufficient textual evidence up until this point. It is worth noting that the narrator says, and I quote, "Between us there was, as I have already said somewhere, the bond of the sea," unquote. Right, that's on the first page of the novel, of the novella. Also, as circumspect readers, we turn the pages to the notes and annotations at the end of the book, from where we know that the somewhere of this quotation is a shining intratextual reference connecting Heart of Darkness with Youth, an earlier novella that Conrad had commented. It is also in the opening lines that we meet some characters on the ship who are only known by their professions. The director of companies, the accountant, the lawyer, and the anonymous narrator. It appears that their selves have been swallowed by their roles, and we only see them as representations for long-established values, such as direction, good leadership, trustworthiness, being judicial, accountable. These are all in contradistinction with the world of insecurities to which we are being initiated at this early juncture. You should also take note of how the narrator, who is soon to literally hand over the helm to Marlowe, invites us readers to accompany him on this journey. He is describing the Thames stretching before us as though we were sharing the same deck with him and his inner circle of friends. We are also on board this ship as listeners, as readers. On yet another important yet marginal note, we have started elaborating on the narrator by saying that he is an extra-diegetic narrator who is not part of any surrounding diegetic frame. In the novella, we can see how the unnamed extra-diegetic narrator produces a framing narrative about Marlowe's storytelling acts in the narrative now. Then, as the story progresses, Marlowe himself will function as an intra-diegetic narrator, producing a framed tale about Kurtz. This framed tale transports his narratees back to an earlier time frame. We will dwell more on the questions of diegesis, or different levels of narration. So that's the meaning of diegesis. Of course, it's an oversimplification by giving you such a definition, but it certainly has a very long history in narratology. It's a modern narratological term. And it is borrowed by Gerald Jeanette. Now, his name will recur on numerous occasions during our classes, so you had better take note of that. Through the opening lines of the novella, I have tried to provide you with a foretaste in this video, a radically shortened explanation of the methodology in which I would like us to elaborate on the minutest details of the text in class. Your task will be to read part 1 of the novella for this week. Further guidelines and signposts on what to pay attention to in the text will be uploaded in our jointly accessible Google Classroom. What I'm going to do in my next video is this. I would like to furnish you with Conrad's biographical background, as well as the historical context which helped shape the novella. Together with these, I will focus on specific and distinguishable features of the modernist narrative. of the modernist fiction. I will attempt to define what modernism is in light of the changing attitudes and sensibilities associated with this otherwise very elusive term, modernism, that is. Now, thank you very much for your attention.